Honey, you don't want to go in there all by yourself, do you? It's dark and it's lonely in there.
It was filmed in Kansas in the early 60s. Over the years, it has become a cult classic. With its remarkable revival in 1989, it is now being hailed as the movie that wouldn't die.
Hey, you want to drag, huh?
This is how a clever little horror movie begins. The movie is Carnival of Souls, and it was filmed in early 1962 in Lawrence, Kansas. The producer-director was Herk Harvey. The writer was John Clifford. It all started here at the Kansas River and in the active imagination of Mr. Harvey.
As I told you, I went on vacation, and coming back from Los Angeles, I saw this place, Salt Air, which is located just outside of Salt Lake. It's very Russian Arabesque in architecture, and I saw it at sunset, and it was the weirdest looking thing I'd ever seen. So I stopped the car and walked about a half mile to take a look at it, and noticed it was deserted. Quite a ways now from the lake, because Salt Lake had gone down, and so the lake is sitting, the amusement park is sitting away from the lake. So I came back and talked to John, showed him a couple of the pictures that I took when I was there, and said, you know, it's a great location. We ought to figure out something to do with that. So John, in his usual way of being inventive, comes up with Carnival of Souls.
The nice thing about working with Herk is that over the years, if you come up with something difficult, he always says, well, you write the way you think it ought to be, and I'll get it shot.
Or try to.
Right. So, you know, writers appreciate that. He lets me do the writing, and I stay out of his directing.
How did you raise the money for the project?
Talked to a couple of local investors who then talked to other people, and the sum of $13,000 was raised over a weekend, which I thought was really pretty amazing, because in those days, that was a fairly good sum. Although the idea of doing a 35mm feature film for $13,000 cash is a little staggering even then. But we did get the money and decided, yes, we can do it, and started shooting the film.
3 hours. Yeah, not sure I want to find that car now. There's sand, and with that current, we may never find it.
The central character in the film, Mary Henry, is the sole survivor of a car wreck in the Kansas River. She keeps seeing an eerie, white-faced character known only as the Man. He was played in the film by Herk Harvey.
Another time, I had just finished putting on the makeup for the Man, and was sitting there looking rather ghoulish, and 2 boys that were going from school and decided to come by, walked by. I stood up and looked at them, never said a word, and both of them took off. So I don't know what their impression was of what happened there.
The majority of the film was shot in and around Lawrence. But the centerpiece of the film, the Salt Air Amusement Park, was located in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Several interesting things happened there. We didn't have enough lights to light the whole pavilion. It was actually the largest dance hall between Chicago and California. And we finally managed, through a local electrician, to hook up from outside and found out the lights in the place still worked, those plus our own lights allowed us to go ahead and film the big ballroom sequence. But an interesting thing happened. The people around the lake, that thing hadn't been lit for years. And the people around the lake all of a sudden started calling the police saying, "What's going on at Salt Air? What's happening?" And the police didn't even know, of course, what was going on at Salt Air. So they came out to find out, but all worked well.
The film itself, with its ideas of the dead haunting and pursuing the living, has inspired many imitations, as well as much discussion among film fans.
Rather than shocking people with gore, it sort of fascinates people with all the great ideas that are in the film.
I'm not as big a fan of the film as a lot of people are. I mean, I think technically it's very beautiful. It's a wonderfully photographed film. I think the pace is a little laborsome in some spots, and it kind of drags, and it's a little hokey in some other areas, but I like the film overall very much, but I don't think it ranks as among one of my favorite films of all time.
For the opening sequence in the film, Harvey used the Lecompton Bridge near Lawrence and encountered one of his highest production expenses.
But they said you will have to pay for repairing the bridge. So after we wrecked the car through the bridge railing and all, when we left that day, we had to get the car out of the river. We got the car out on the first hookup, and then on the way back, I watched the men repairing it, and later I got a bill for $12 for repairing the bridge, which of course would be a little different today.
John Clifford and Herk Harvey worked for years in industrial filmmaking at Centron Films, a firm in Lawrence.
Kansas.
Have you ever been there?
No, Aunt Emily always visited the family here.
This early Kansas promotional film was directed by Harvey, who also had a major part.
What started out as a director and remained a director for 35 years at Centron. The interesting thing about it was that with each project, of course, the nature of the job changed because we were making educationals, industrials. That included a variety of subjects, and also in some of the industrials we got into musicals and extensive travel and this sort of thing. So the job itself was very interesting in that it was always different.
I think I probably had to use everything I knew about technique and dramatization and everything to keep these subjects interesting.
Herk and John have retired from Centron, but Carnival of Souls, their own independent production, still haunts this affable duo.
Well, all I've said about Carnival of Souls is it's a heck of a note when a film that has failed financially is your total breadth of success in the feature film market.
The movie has been described by critics as an overlooked gem that shows what imagination and enterprise can accomplish with meager financing. After the film was completed, it was premiered in Lawrence at the Granada Theater in September 1962. Reaction to the film was mixed.
It's a peculiar thing when you're local and you make a film and local people come to see it. They come to see if you made a film like Hollywood would make. You know, if we had made a grade C Hollywood type film, they said, "Oh, good, you know, they know how to make a Hollywood type." Never occurs to them you might have done something original. Out on the West Coast, we got a lot of comment out there about, they called this a real jewel of a little independent film. We've had directors out there say at that time it was the best low-budget independent film they'd ever seen.
Despite the fact it has been acclaimed in numerous publications, including being featured in a recent book showcasing great films of the 60s and 70s, Carnival of Souls has always been a thorn in the side of its creators.
And a friend of ours who used to work for Calvin Company in Kansas City was then working for General Labs, and he said a new distribution company had just been formed called Hertz Lion. It was a publicly held company and should be a very good one because they had a considerable amount of money. So in talking to those people, they seemed anxious to get the film. They had received others from Texas and around the country and had purchased 3 comedies from England. So it sounded like a good deal. So we went with Hertz Lion. We got glowing reports to start with. I went to South America on another film, and when I came back, it was obvious that they owed us considerable money but hadn't paid us a cent. When I started investigating, I got no replies, and the next thing I knew, the president of the company had gone to Europe, and the funds were gone with him.
When Carnival of Souls was first released by Hertz Lion in 1962 as part of a double feature with The Devil's Messenger, it was shortened to 75 minutes to allow for more showings. Herk Harvey's original cut of the film had been 84 minutes. But a longer version of the film might have existed had it not been for a processing error which destroyed one reel of the movie.
We lost a roll of film that was, I think, very critical. And that was just before the dance. We had this long shot. It was a great evening at Salt Lake. And they have all of these pilings out in the water, just lone pilings. And I had people in dark costumes behind the pilings. And then on cue, it's as though the pilings start to move, but all these people start towards the pavilion. And then we had scenes, you know, of hands coming up on the pavilion and faces. And this is the first time you see these people. In the processing, they simply overexposed it and it was gone. Of course, that was about 8 minutes of film, but it's one of those things that you'd like to have had. It wasn't, the nice thing is it wasn't sync sound, it wasn't critical for the exposition of the film, but...
The shortened version of Carnival of Souls left out several brief but important scenes, including shots of Mary Henry being menaced by the dancing zombies at the end of the film. It is this short version that has been circulating for the past 2 decades, because the film resurfaced and developed a cult following due to its numerous showings on late-night television.
Even from the beginning, the distributor never knew what to do with the film. He put it out as a double feature in drive-ins and so forth. And it wasn't until the film sold to Europe and played in Europe, as over there it suddenly began playing in downtown art houses.
For the past few years, it was hard to find Carnival of Souls on your local TV station or at your local video store. But things are changing. In fact, the future for this little film has never looked brighter. However, the future for Mary Henry wasn't so bright. You see, she died in that car wreck in the Kansas River. That's when she joined the Carnival of Souls. The future for Carnival of Souls changed in early 1989 when a new distributor for the film, Panorama Entertainment, started re-releasing the movie to theaters and film festivals. The film festivals were in Dallas, Boston, New York, and other cities. Critical response to the film this time around was ecstatic. Glowing reviews appeared in Rolling Stone, The New Yorker, The Chicago Tribune, and others. TV stories appeared on Entertainment Tonight, MTV, and Siskel and Ebert. Herk Harvey and John Clifford were also honored with Life Achievement Awards by the Kansas Film Institute.
I really appreciate this particular award because it's from people, it's from the Kansas Film Institute, first of all, from Kansans, from people in Lawrence, and they say, we know you, and we thank you, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
The revival of Carnival of Souls reached a climax of sorts on November 24th, 1989, here at the Liberty Hall Theater in Lawrence, Kansas. The film was re-premiered and most of the cast and crew were reunited at a special benefit for the Lawrence Film Commission. Within the crowd of over 300 attending the event were some of the original investors in the film.
Well, we were friends of Herk Harvey and John Clifford. They were good customers. I was in the real estate and insurance business at that time, and they were good customers, and they came to us needing some help. We thought they had a lot of talent. We thought it'd be kind of exciting. It'd be a little break from real estate, so we put up our $1,000, about 4 of us in the firm, each.
Among the cast and crew in attendance were, of course, writer John Clifford and director-actor Herk Harvey, along with Candace Hilligoss, who played Mary Henry, Sidney Berger, who played leering neighbor John Linden, Art Ellison and Stan Levitt, who played respectively the minister and the doctor, and Larry Sneegis, the kid who began the drag race which started the film. Sneegis was also the movie's production manager. Earlier in the day, a press conference was held at the Eldridge Hotel, and Herk Harvey appeared in his famous ghoul costume and makeup.
Actually, it is amazing that there has been a revival of Carnival of Souls. It was made in 1961, released in 1962, and the very fact that we're here today, 27 years later, doing all this Mickey Mouse and so forth, saying that we're enjoying the revival of Carnival of Souls is fun. It's fun, I think, for all of us that were in it, because we thought that about 25 years ago it had died a natural death.
I made that when I was a graduate student here at the University of Kansas, and I do remember that we shot all night frequently, and I remember equally well that I kept falling asleep in my classes every day because I couldn't manage a 24-hour-a-day schedule. But I had a wonderful time, and I don't think the film ever really died because friends of mine in Europe and throughout the country kept sending me pages torn out of TV guides saying it was appearing on Supernatural Theater or the equivalent somewhere in the country. So in all the 27 years, I don't think there's been a year when it has not been shown somewhere, much to my amazement.
I was in a New York subway in August, and I picked up the Daily News, and the headline in the theater section said, "The movie that refused to die." And I read it, and I thought, well, this sounds very interesting. And then all of a sudden, I was reading about myself, and I almost fell into the subway track in total shock. And then I went around to the other newsstands, and I said, are there reviews out? And I opened up, and there was a 6-inch picture of myself coming out of the mud in the Daily News. And then I realized there was a renaissance. And then I was sitting in a beauty shop, and the hairdresser at Kenneth's was bragging about the movie star's hair that he was cutting, and I happened to flip open the New York magazine, and I saw Pick of the Week, Carnival of Souls. And I said, you didn't know you had a cult heroine in your chair, did you? And of course he was quite flabbergasted, as I was flabbergasted, because it was all over town. So it was a lot of fun. It was very exciting, and it was fun to see that it's getting recognized. I guess you can only say, you know, better late than never, even if it is a few years after the fact.
I've got to tell you that this has not been easy for me in classrooms, particularly when someone like Roger Ebert reviews the film and says of me that I was the definitive study of a nerd in lust, which was, I think, run a close second to in the Dallas, I forget which Dallas paper, but the Morning News, which said I was an on-the-make, a greasy on-the-make dude. Others just said I was greasy, so they had a long way to go before Mr. Ebert's review. But I told my class I didn't know where I could go from here after being the definitive nerd in lust. It's been great fun for me too, and frankly, the whole notion of how a film like ours got made is really a kind of miracle in itself when you realize how it was shot and the kinds of resources that John and Herk had to work with. I think what you see on the screen is really rather remarkable, and every time I see it, I admire it more in terms of how we were able to just accomplish what we had with such limited resources.
Do you remember the day you got in the car?
You mean the day you forced me in?
Right.
And held me in?
There was a policeman there, and he had to leave or arrest me, so I guess he thought it was diplomatic to leave, and I think Candace could have killed him and me both, because it was cold.
I think it's also a lesson for actors and the whole notion of doing the best you can, regardless of the circumstances you're in. I mean, having Candace in that car in freezing water and all the rest, Candace still had a real job to do of acting, and I mean, there were times, because of the economies of the film, where I remember one shot where Candace we walked into the house where we were shooting one night, and the first shot of the night was Candace getting hysterical, having seen death in the mirror after my kissing her neck. I don't know if there was something significant about that, but it was very difficult for Candace to do. I mean, to walk in out of the cold and suddenly get emotionally very excited. So we just went off to a corner and talked about it some, and then we went back and got it, I think, in one take, did we not? And the other is, I'll never forget the fact that there was one shot of my left eye filling the entire screen when Candace was in the room of her boarding house taking a bath, and it was supposed to be a very salacious look, and it filled the entire screen. Well, I've been blind on this eye since birth, and all of my friends who were very methody came to me and said, Sidney, what did you do? I mean, that look was fabulous. And of course, I was reading a newspaper, I think, with this eye when they were shooting this one.
People would keep asking me to write Carnival of Souls 2. So far, I've been resisting. I don't know why they don't ask me to write something else. But,
When this was first shown, it was shown primarily in drive-ins as part of a double bill with The Devil's Messenger.
And now, in its re-release, it's being shown in the art houses, which is where we would like to have had it the first time around. And as far as we're concerned, that's great. Makes all the difference.
Prior to the evening screening, the cast and crew of the film were honored during an informal stage discussion introduced by Judy Billings of the Lawrence Film Commission.
Secondly, I'd like to again thank the Lawrence Film Commission for showing Carnival of Souls tonight and allowing those of us up here to have a 27-year reunion. It's just like having a class reunion. It's strange to see these people, and an hour after you're together, they all look just like they did when we were making the film, although it was 27 years ago. Another thing I'd like to say before we get started here is about Lawrence. Lawrence has been wonderful to John, to me. It's been a great place to make films, and this film, I don't know how it's happening, quite frankly. I don't know how it's getting this revival, but it's happening and almost beyond our control. But the thing that is so nice is that we had 35 years of making motion pictures here, and I see many friends that I have worked at Centron with here in town making motion pictures, and we had a lot of good years making films, and the people of Lawrence and the Lawrence community is what made it a great experience for us. It couldn't have been better. I think everybody here, a good example of these investors tonight. Joe Traylor told me if I ever wanted to make a feature, he could probably get some money. I told him on Friday night, on Monday, he had $17,000 with deferred salaries. We made the total show for $30,000, which I went last night to see. Back to the Future 2. And I'm sure that one of the special effects in there would cost more than the total budget of Carnival. Another thing you get with 27 years is senility. Now, about Carnival, I think let's just start it the way it happened. John wrote it. John, tell us about it.
Well, let's see, that was 27 years ago. To be honest, I can't even remember writing it. As I remember, my inspiration for the story was that Herk said if I would write a script, he would produce it. That's your world-famous moneymaker. The writer doesn't get that kind of offer very often. So I would have, at that stage in my career, I would have written anything. So I said, what kind of story do you want? And he said, I don't know, but I wanted to end up with dead people dancing in a ballroom by the Great Salt Lake. I said, sounds good to me.
And when I came to Lawrence, I learned that low budget means you don't have a double, you don't have a stunt woman, you don't have a makeup person, you do your own hair and you do your own makeup. It also meant that you also go into the water for 8 hours at a time. And the director had promised me Indian summer in late September. And somehow Indian summer didn't come. Then we got into a department store in Salt Lake City, and 6 of us, we just trooped upstairs with up an escalator. We didn't stop to ask permission, and I think Herk went over to a sales lady and said, listen, for 25 bucks, would you look the other way? Let us go in the dressing room with this woman. She wants to change her clothes and not let anyone else come in. She said, sure, for $25, she'd look the other way. So they came in, and the scene, you'll see, that's how it was done. And so many ways, you see, anyone can make a movie when you have $8 million and a crew of 150 people. That's easy. Try making Carnival of Souls. So I'll let Sydney tell you the rest.
Well, I had a wonderful time. I was a graduate student here at KU when we were making Carnival of Souls, and the story about how I got into it is kind of interesting. One gentleman in the audience, Larry Sneakus, probably hates my guts because I took the part away from him. I was asked to read opposite several young ladies that Herk was considering before we got Candace. And he said, well, I like the way you read. I've got the part cast, but I'll shift this young man to something else, for which I'm eternally grateful. And I will be staying away from Larry for the rest of the evening. But we shot a lot of the scenes that I was in all night. We had to shoot all night because Herk was trying to get this film done in an hour or an hour and a half at the outside.
Thank you so very much.
All in all, it was a very successful night for Carnival of Souls. Articles about the reunion appeared in People magazine, Film Facts, and Cine Fantastique, a publication that brought Carnival of Souls to public attention in a 1983 feature story. Currently, Carnival of Souls is available on videocassette in several versions. Only the 84-minute cut is the version director Herk Harvey put back together in 1989. This may not be the end of the story, but it's certainly a better one than it had in 1962. Both Herk Harvey and John Clifford were delighted and surprised at the revival of Carnival of Souls.
Yeah, like I had a chance last year to go back and be on a symposium on horror films in New York. And it was interesting, the number of people there who had seen the film and had... But the interesting thing is when you get on those, then they start saying, now, did you really intend to do this and this? Which, as John said, we intended just to make a good horror film and one that had some pizzazz to it. And a lot of these things we really didn't consider. But it's nice to have them consider it now because it seems to have much more depth than we ever gave it, probably.
That's right. They're asking us what we were thinking about, what we were doing 25 years ago, and they're talking to a couple of guys who can hardly remember what they were doing last week.